Experiencing the acute pain of betrayal is like a sharp blade cutting through the heart. My existence, once filled with warmth and confidence, disintegrated when the individual I valued most turned to deception. "Why, Lucy?" I recall questioning, my anguish apparent in my tone. "It's not what you think," she dishonestly responded, her gaze avoiding mine, while murmurs of her unfaithfulness resounded. "Yes, so much better," she whispered to someone else. The harsh reality, relentless and stark, broke our fanciful notion of affection, leaving me to tread a road strewn with dishonesty. This is my narrative through heartbreak and enlightenment. Take pleasure in observing it. I scanned the room but saw zip. It was pitch black. Even though I couldn't see a thing, I felt it all. The feelings creeping up were pretty amazing. So good they nearly made me forget the pounding headache as I turned left. Suddenly I got wind of a strong, wild scent. My head felt like it was going to pop off, but I let the feeling in. Then it hit me. I did something bad because what I felt was way too tiny to be anything harmless. Who did I? The thought barely formed before my headache blasted to the next level. "Just chill, baby," she whispered. That husky voice, rough from smokes, could only belong to one gal in town, and things just got stickier for me. I tried, really tried, but blanked out on the last 24 hours or why my wife's sister was here making me feel good. "Janet, this is nice and all, but can you stop?" I said. Light then tore through the dark, hitting my head like a bomb. "Oh, maybe not my brightest move," she muttered. "But you're curious about what's happening, right?" "Yeah," I said. "That's banging around in my noodle." "So you remember Nada from last night?" she probed. "Nada," I replied. But judging by my head, booze was the star of the show. "You needed to let loose," she said. "From now on, I'm making sure we do just that more often." "What do you mean, we?" I asked. "Mabel's gonna have my head." "Mabel's gone, honey." "Forgot that too?" she quizzed. "Was it tequila?" When I hit that, my short-term memory checks out, and I do dumb stuff. Please don't tell me I went overboard on shots. She shook her head. Her pretty face moving made my stomach turn. I bolted for the bathroom, but rammed into a wall. Wrong way. Janet pointed me right. I dashed, spotted the toilet with its pink cover, and hurled. "Feeling any better?" she asked, handing me mouthwash and a brand new toothbrush after I was done. The brush was blue, my fave shade. Surprising was, Janet kept her eyes on me, even hugged me from behind as I cleaned up. Janet's not as gifted as Mabel, but the moment felt weird, us being bare. After brushing and rinsing, she faced me keen. "Let me see," she said. This ticked me off. Mabel, my wife, often did the same. I guess their mom had this thing when they were kids. Mabel wanted me to grin widely, so I showed my teeth to Janet. "Not like that, sweetie," she said. Coming closer, she kissed me, pressing against me, her tongue sweeping my mouth. Despite the hangover, I was ready. "So even after last night, you still want more," she noted. Janet. "What?" "I just really need our questions answered," I said. "Cool, get dressed. We've still got the bank when it opens in about an hour. But first coffee and I'll spill everything. My name is Mabel Forrester. I've been hoofing it all night. Dogs chased me. My legs are slashed, bleeding. Yesterday's fancy heels are trash now. Those shoes were great for a night out, but trash for walking on roads. Luckily, it's light now. Still miles from town, and home is even farther, if it still counts as mine. If my damn sister chose, I probably lost it. Can't believe she'd do me dirty like this, after I've been nothing but good to her. Still, she had to stab me in the back. Someone once said blood is thicker than water. Clearly, they've never met Janet. Then, lights on the road behind me. A truck slowed down, teenagers inside. It was the Miller kid and Sarah Winslow with others in the back, probably headed to the lake. I waved, hoping for a lift, but they sped off as soon as they saw it was me. My legs ached. My feet were screaming. I was starved. But I kept moving, knowing stopping was not an option. The teens' reaction when they saw me stayed with me. I knew it'd be bad. Small towns can be harsh, but their fear was beyond anything I expected. Did I mess up so bad that even a little kindness was too much to ask for? Just yesterday, I was on top of the world in our small Iowa twin towns. Not for anything special I did, though I'd never admit that, but because of my husband. It's funny because he never belonged here to start with. Not in Harrison or Delaval. He came for me. I bumped into David Forrester while I was with my folks in Chicago. They had moved for better medical help. Mom was in constant pain, and there was this clinic in Chicago good for her condition. Dave tagged along back home with me and never left. We got hitched and settled. That was 23 years back. Harrison and Daleville each had its own set of bosses and rules. Schools, too. Founded by siblings who couldn't see eye to eye. Back then, the towns were rivals. Now they lean on each other. All because money's tight. My Chicago man, Mark, walked into our small-town lives. Those towns were tiny, needed everything. When Dave first showed up, a buddy of mine was in a fix. His tractor broke, no spare to be found. Dave, with his knack for fixing, made a part from scratch. Suddenly, he was everybody's go-to guy. Usually, you'd have to wait for an expert from the city, costing an arm and a leg. Dave started fixing more than just tractors, then appliances, then tech. I even convinced him to take my sister Janet under his wing. Had I known, I'd have pushed her out of town the minute she finished school. Janet was the surprise baby, Mom and Dad's little miracle. I was 15 when she arrived. Fast forward, I'm 44 and she's 29. Janet adored Dave, was always around him. I brushed it off as a kid's crush. My love for Dave felt old. He was familiar but boring. His look screamed local, shaggy with a touch of belly. We were doing fine, money-wise. I had my fancy car, but Dave clung to his old rusty Mustang, proud yet falling apart. Over time, I morphed into someone else, wearing fancy clothes, driving my Mercedes as if I owned the roads. Dave, the Chicago man, turned into Mr. Smalltown. The town folks got fed up with my city ways but loved Dave more for his simple heart. He helped farmers when banks said no, fixed things without asking for much, just enough to cover costs. Then the schools needed computers. Quotes came in sky high. At the town meeting, Dave offered to do it all for free or at cost. I was stunned. There I was, wanting more, and here was Dave, content with enough. I can't pinpoint when my feelings shifted. I dressed up more, stayed out longer, flirted without shame. Initially, men responded, but then they withdrew, giving me weird looks. I blamed it on their small-town minds. But walking home, deep shame hit me. I was the issue, not them. And then there's Jeff, a lawyer with a fancy car like mine. Except, turns out, it's his wife's car. He forgot to mention her. Jeff lied a lot during the 4 months we were together. He flirted first, then took things further. He always told me I was pretty. Funny thing is, he was meant to date Janet before me. He had a couple of dates with her when he first came here, then she dumped him. She just laughed whenever we mentioned him. Maybe she knew better than me. I wish someone had told me why she left him. Now I'm here, walking this lonely country road. It feels like it's the same story with Dave. Ever since she met him, my sister judged all guys by him. In her eyes, none were good enough. I need to get to town to find a way home. As a last option, I need to get some cash so I can make it back. David Forrester, are you up yet? Despite feeling low, hearing Janet shout felt normal. Come for coffee if you want. Janet, no need to shout, I said as I entered her super clean kitchen. Janet was making coffee, wearing nothing. She turned and kissed me hard. She hugged me close, bare skin and all. Shouldn't you wear something? I asked. No, I want you to remember this, she said, then kissed me again. Why keep doing this? I asked her. Because I don't know how it will end, she said, smiling. She asked me to think hard about last night. We sat down and she held my hand. I remembered getting a call to fix the drive-in theater's big projectors. Not hardware, but a software issue. I worked fast because they needed it for a double show, filming funny moments between movies. It was meant to be private, but I messed up the setup and broadcast a personal moment of my sister with that jerk. I couldn't go on, felt like crying. Janet comforted me. She asked what happened next. I said I went to his car, dragged him out, and hit him. Just once, but he fell hard. Then a crowd, including Janet, gathered. Mrs. Daniels, the library volunteer, even kicked him. Janet remembered and smiled. What then? She asked. The sheriff came. Jeff woke up wanting to charge me, but witnesses played it off as him being drunk. He got tickets for drunkenness, DUI, and false reporting. He shouted about being framed as the sheriff took them, but not to jail, to the cinema. You and I, the judge, all were there. The judge made Mabel sign some papers, saying she made a mistake. The city looks after its own, he said. Janet nodded. Then they left and I don't remember more. But being with the judge, Sheriff, mayor, and others, drinking, smelling barbecue, that I remember. Then waking up here with you, Janet said she'd fill me in. This started a week ago, but really it was building longer. She looked serious, taking my coffee to the living room. We sat together on the couch, her legs on my lap, still holding hands. "Comfortable?" she asked. I nodded, ready to listen. There was no way we could get to the city in just 12 minutes. I didn't mind, since I didn't see why we'd even need to hit the bank. Look, you gotta know something. From way back, when I first got what boys were about, I've kind of been stuck on you. But what you might not know is, it wasn't just a silly crush. Me and Mabel, we've had our share of ups and downs. Even had a bust-up over you once. The latest was just last week. We'll circle back to that. So I've dated guys, 'cause that's normal, right? But none felt right for you. She gave me this smile, then kissed my hand. About 6 weeks back, I started seeing Jeff Rosberg. We went out a few times, but he just wasn't it. Not you. I couldn't shake him off just 'cause of that, but he gave me the creeps. Felt like he was just chasing skirts, and I wasn't going to be just another notch. Then I did some digging online, and wow, did things get juicy? Turns out he's a king of lies. The car? Not his, but his wife's. The company he boasts about? Not his either. Guy's not a lawyer, he's just a paralegal, stuffing papers for real lawyers. The company? His father-in-law's, and Rosberg? That's his wife's name. They let him take it when they got hitched. So I ditched him. Her smile reached me again. I was starting to really enjoy just us. After we split, whispers started that we got intimate, which was a total lie. I brushed it off until he started spreading rumors, real weird stuff like me and my sister, a total mess. But then I catch him and Mabel. His hand was up her skirt and she just stood there. I lost it. I confronted them, asking her how she could be so dumb. I was raw with emotion, so when you hugged me, it just hit harder. She looked at me all blank, told me you're always busy and she was just bored, wanted some fun. Said I'd get it when I'm older. Jeff got mad, tried to defend himself. She backtracked, saying he just got her more than you did. Talked about money, big houses, how you could have been richer. Janet took control, made a call. Speaking to someone, dropping my name, making sure I was all right. Then phone in my hand. "Hello? Hi, Dave. Sorry for your loss, but it's for the best. You'll be happier." Just confirming stuff about my accounts, making sure they're locked, but business as usual for work. I agreed. Janet took over, chatting with the lady, laughing at some points, then wrapped it up. She led me to the couch. "Lie down," she said. I did, and she snuggled up, getting the story back on track. She made me promise not to spill about catching them. Yet Jeff went blabbing, saying it had come out when the divorce papers hit. My heart sank. I was hit with the truth about Jeff. No riches, no law career, just leeching and planning to mooch off someone else post-divorce. Hearing all this from Janet, I was gut-punched. But still, I admitted, I loved her. Janet held me closer. "I know, hon, but you gotta let her go. You can and you will," she assured. We had a plan for the divorce, needed a solid reason for her to sign off. Turns out, laws protect even the ones who break hearts. So we thought hard, figured a fair deal might tempt her to sign. We didn't plan what happened at the drive-in. That was pure luck. But there were enough folks who knew about Mabel and Jeff, ready with cameras. Our goal? To get Mabel face-to-face with the proof, make her sign the papers, pen a goodbye to you, and leave town for good. And after she departed, I would assist you forget about her in any case. We have an even stronger case after witnessing her on a large screen in front of half of both cities, making love to someone else's boyfriend. Last night, the judge and sheriff brought Jeff to jail. His wife and relatives secured bail for him in the morning and took him home. According to Bonnie from the bank, he will soon be divorced and deprived of his assets. They released Mabel outside the drive-in theater, but because Jeff's car had been confiscated, she had to attempt to walk home. But it's nearly 30 miles. I answered, "Let him get what he deserves." Janet chuckled. "Anyway, honey, seeing the woman you love 20 feet above the ground on that enormous screen in front of the entire city was probably enough to startle you. The judge concluded that the best thing for you was to get drunk and escape yourself. That is what they did." The sheriff remembered how his brother got over his divorce hangover by hanging out with another woman at a cheap bar. I could not let that happen, so as soon as you drank, I seized the initiative. I looked at Janet. Then I questioned why she did all of this. I don't typically drink much, I explained. In college, I discovered that I had a low tolerance for alcohol. If I drink tequila. It's terribly horrible, dear, she explained. You must have been in awful shape back then because you not only finished the entire bottle, but also ate a damn worm. I didn't know what to say, so I tried to look off to the side. Then I brought you home, she explained. I brought you to my place because I feel at ease here, and it was closer. Do you remember the rest? She looked at me, raised one brow and smiling broadly. No, I replied. Did I act like a fool while I was drunk? Do you know? You mean, have you attempted to have sex with me? She asked mockingly. I nodded nervously. She snuggled even closer to me. No, you did not try, she began. I was relieved. I stripped you nude the moment we walked through the door. We had sex 3 times last night. The first time happened right there on the floor. She pointed to a position near the door. For the second, we went to my bedroom. It was quite nice. You said you loved me then. And you stated that if you were not already married, you would have married me. Then we fell asleep. I awoke around 3 a.m. and went to the bathroom. I felt great when I got back into bed and snuggled up to you. I felt utterly ashamed. I apologized, Janet, I told her. It must have been just as horrible for you as it was for me. I honestly don't know what to say or do. I'm just feeling numb right now. I can't believe Mabel would cheat on me. I believe I have no idea. And to be honest, it is not my fault. I sort of let myself go. I suppose I'm just like that rusted old Mustang out there. You can look at me and say, I used to be someone, but now I'm just a joke. I attempted to sit up and get away from her, but she instead forced herself closer to me. Janet, I am saying now, I told her, I just wish you didn't have to be the sacrificial sheep who tolerated me last night. Dave, are you out of your mind? She barked. She stood up and looked at me, saying, Sometimes you make me so mad. Why the hell do you think I'm here? She asked. Do you know why you awoke here instead of at a cheap brothel? She asked. I shook my head dumbly. You're all confused about things and you feel like a pity case. You simply don't perceive things. Because one ignorant woman who doesn't see things clearly attempted to hurl mud at you. Janet was visibly angry. David, do I feel as if I can't manage one drunken man? She exclaimed. Furthermore, you are not a violent drunk and do not exhibit any hostile behavior. Everything that happened to you last night was because others care about you. The sheriff and the judge adore you. Everyone in these 2 small communities adores you. We could not do it without you. Your company serves both cities, and most of the time you price significantly less than competitors. You offer credit to small farmers and business owners. You do things for schools and so on. Dave, we all love you, she remarked. We will not allow anyone to pee on you, including my foolish sister. Dave, you seem to have forgotten that I took your clothing off last night. I wanted to be with you. I've always desired this. So when the time arose, I took advantage of her. She stated that both you and your Mustang require minor care, such as polishing and sprucing, in order to realize your maximum potential. And then you'll both be something to celebrate. She remained silent for a long, just looking at me. You have 60 days until you have to go in court to sign the final divorce papers or attempt to reclaim my idiotic sister. Why don't you go on a diet, begin a workout routine, and restore your vehicle? So you can shine. It's enough to make Mabel get her head out of her ass and want you back. Perhaps you'll get over her and want someone else. I'm not sure how far I was from town when the next truck arrived. It was a massive old truck, perhaps transporting components or materials. The driver stared at me from the cab of the truck and asked where I was heading. I just need to get into town, I told him. How old are you? He asked. I believe my vanity made me think. He was curious if I was under 18. In truth, the situation was very different. I'm 35, I told him, subtracting around 10 years from my true age. Is your dress older than you? He spoke sharply. However, it's a good beginning place. Remember the old saying from the 1980s about giving hitchhikers rides? No, I replied, bewildered. It was on every bumper sticker, he said. I still can't remember. I said, gasoline or grass? He hinted. Ah, I remembered. I do not have any money to give you for gas, since I am heading to the bank in town. I have never smoked marijuana, so I don't have it either, and I do not see how we can. I began. I was confident that the driver would not leave me in jeopardy far from the city. He returned his head to the cabin and started the motor, beginning to drive away. Wait! I screamed. I couldn't move forward no matter what I did. He helped me get into the bed of his truck. He then removed my clothing and began having sex with me. I was both astonished and numb. It wasn't about making love. Yes, it was. I wasn't even sure what to call it. Dave was always gentle with me, gradually working me up until I was asking him to please me. I haven't had sex with Jeff yet. We were on our way to this last night when we were stopped, but I was not going to have sex with Jeff unless he asked me to marry him. In any case, the truck was disrespectful to me. I wanted to yell at him to stop, but if I did, he'd throw me out of the vehicle, forcing me to walk the rest of the way into town. Any challenge was preferable to this. So I let him utilize my body as my thoughts worked out the next step. As soon as I am in town, I will take money from the bank and contact Dave and Jeff. I couldn't afford to wait 60 days to speak to my husband. They provided me insufficient money to survive on. Furthermore, I wasn't sure I wanted a divorce. And Jeff, I liked how he was in better condition than Dave, dressed showy clothes and drove a car similar to mine. But I wasn't certain I wanted him. He was exactly what I told my foolish younger sister. He was entertaining. Sure, Dave was monotonous, but when things go wrong, he is the type of man I can rely on. I didn't know about Jeff. Dave was likewise trying to protect me, despite the fact that he was out of shape. I couldn't believe it when I saw him drag Jeff, who was bigger, out of the car and beat him up because of me. So I needed to go to the bank and withdraw some money so I could rent a car or have someone take me home. I'll chat to Dave there to see what our issue is and if we can get this resolved. The judge's order and the preliminary divorce agreement I signed last night will have no meaning. After the truck stopped me, he even dared to reach out and kiss me. "Perhaps you can allow me in again later?" he asked. "Simply drive the truck?" I responded harshly. He was right to let him go again. I did not get anything out of it. I couldn't believe it when we got to the bank. We drove for barely about 10 minutes. He had me for approximately an hour and a half for a 10-minute trip. I stepped out of the truck and showed him that as I sat down on the bench in front of the bank, I fell asleep practically immediately. Even my favorite comfort bed at home did not feel as cozy as the bear's seat. I woke up several times before the bank opened. The first time I heard a rooster at morning. I knew there were still a few hours till the bank opened at 9 a.m. I approached the diner and asked the waitress if I may have breakfast if I agreed to return and pay for it later when the bank opened. She glanced at me as if I were a bug emerging from beneath a stone. "Hell no," she snorted. "Without money, there is no food." I realized she wasn't the restaurant's owner, so I asked her who the boss was. She pointed to the person behind the counter. I moved up to him and smashed my hand against the plate before him. "Do you know who I am?" I asked him. "Just a woman sleeping in her outfit." He asked, "Do you know my name?" I shouted at him. Everyone in the diner looked at us. "Mabel, not only do I know your name, but I also know the size of your sagging breasts and how you prefer to be stroked and pinched. I know many things about you that I don't understand. What the hell do you want?" He spoke calmly, so his clients were unimpressed. His tone of voice made it plain that he was not only aware of what had happened the night before, but that he had no intention of forgiving me. I turned and walked away, keeping my dignity. As I passed the back of the restaurant, I noticed a man knock on the door. The door opened, and the cook handed him a bag of food. I approached him and asked if I might have some of the meal. "Show me your breasts," he mumbled. I looked around to ensure that no one could see us. Then I leaned forward to pull it down the front of my dress. He stretched out and aggressively grabbed my left breast. "They're flat and flabby," he explained. He turned my back on him and grasped my buttocks. "Hello, where's my food?" I asked. "I'm starving." "What food?" he asked, clutching his luggage. "Tighter. You claimed that if I showed you my breasts, you would give me part of your food," I reminded him. "No," he replied. "That is what you heard. You approached and asked if you may eat any of my food. I never said you could or that I'd share with you. I requested you to show me your breasts. There was no meal package. Furthermore, all you need to do is walk up to the door and knock. This is all of the leftovers that they can't sell. That is what I adore about this town. They give it away because they are unable to sell it. You allow everyone who asks to see your breasts and touch your buttocks." I left him and went to knock on the door. The young man who opened it nearly died of shock. He abruptly closed the door in my face. I went back to the bank and sat down on my bench again. A few minutes later, I fell back asleep. about 1 hour later. I awoke when I thought many enormous drops of rain had fallen on me. I feared I was going to be wet, but fortunately it stopped. The next time I woke up, the weather was bright and sunny, and the bank was about to open. I puzzled why none of the bank personnel awakened me up when they entered. Dave transacted a lot of business with this bank. They could not afford to end their relationship with me. Several kids pointed at me and laughed. I glanced angrily at their mother, who had taken them away, and she grinned. I was aware that my clothing was wrinkled, but it was no excuse to be nasty. Sally Anderson, a bank employee, noticed me walk in and grinned while looking away. I realized she was about to start laughing at me. I waited in line with the cashiers. The man at the end of the line appeared afraid. He began coughing and hastily went to sit at the table. The bank provided services such as filling out forms and writing checks. The woman in line ahead of me now motions for me to move forward. She struggled not to chuckle while dialing a number on her cell phone. She remained approximately 5 feet away from me in line. Mary Dickinson approached me and led me out of the line to her office. Mary and I went to school together, and she handled all of our expenditures. "Hello, Mary," I said. "I am delighted you came for me. I don't have a wallet and I need cash. It does not matter." She smiled. Finally, I stated that I believed I had found someone in this small town who respected me in the way I deserved. I noticed Mary dialing a number on the phone while trying not to giggle. "What's hilarious about my wrinkled dress?" I asked. Mary laughed as she explained that it is not the clothing. She removed a mirror from one of her tables. She handed me a mirror, and I stared at myself. My makeup looked horrible. My eyeliner streamed down my face, giving me the look of a raccoon. My pricey lip gloss had been smeared vulgarly all over my face, probably when the truck kissed me as he was making love with me. I resembled a cross between Heath Ledger from the latest Batman film and a lovely, accessible woman. But what probably made everyone laugh the hardest was 2 enormous drops of bird excrement in the front of my hair. What I mistook for rainfall was a message from the pigeons indicating that they did not approve of me either. "So you said it doesn't matter if I don't have my wallet or identification." I spoke with as much dignity as I could muster. "I think $200 will be sufficient." When I said it didn't matter, Mary started. "I meant that it doesn't matter if you have a wallet or not. I can't offer you money." "What the hell are you talking about, you country bitch?" I exclaimed. I leapt to my feet and leaned towards her, exhaling deeply. If only she understood what I had to go through. Mary stayed calm and professional. "Mabel, even if you believe you belong to the elite society of the big metropolis and own fancy clothing and a car, you are just as country as I am. We attended school, played together, and grew up in the same tiny town, so get off your high horse and allow me to explain what is going on." I sat back down, and she paused for a few moments before continuing to chat. "The accounts you have access to have been temporarily frozen," she explained. "I do not comprehend." I snapped. "This has never occurred before. Why is my money frozen? Do you realize how much money I have in that blasted bank?" "Yes, I understand." She spoke beautifully. "Not 1 penny. Your husband owns all of the money in these accounts, including the credit cards you do not now have, or if the information from last night was correct. Soon-to-be ex-husband. I do not understand what is going on here," I snapped. "Yet Dave and I remain married, and we shall remain till the final verdict is signed. I'll get a fantastic lawyer, and in 60 days no paperwork will be signed. Dave and I will get together again, and you rednecks will have plenty of time to eat a crow smeared in feces." Mary began laughing. "What's so funny?" I barked. "You should have left out the final hour. Then we'd have eaten you." She laughed. "Okay," she said. "I've been told. If you come, I am permitted to offer you $0 and provide you with a phone number. Here's $0. She gave me an empty bank envelope before handing me the phone. "Dave, I am deeply sorry." I spoke into the phone. "No, you do not regret it. Mabel, you have chosen your path. Now follow it." Dave is unable to answer the phone right now. I recognized the voice. It was my sister Janet. "Janet, you're not taking my husband," I screamed into the telephone. "Why not?" "Mabel," she asked. "He will make some city woman a happy wife. Why not me?" "Because you're my sister," I told her. "That must signify something. This implies I called Mom and Dad in Chicago. I did not tell them what a cruel thing you did to the man who has loved and supported you for over 20 years. The same man who covers all of Mom's pricey surgeries. That is what I decided. I will let you tell them." "Janet, what are you talking about?" I asked. "Dave needs some time away from you to clear his mind," she explained. "So you are going to Chicago for 2 months. You may return in 60 days for a court hearing. You will also have 1 meeting with Dave during that period. Until then, Mabel, leave him alone. He is already suffering enough. I left you a bus ticket at the station as well as a suitcase full of your fashionable items. I even left you $1.20 to buy meals on the journey. Stay with Mom and Dad for a few months and consider your actions. Perhaps when you return, he will be ready to speak with you. Perhaps you can contact Jeff in the meanwhile." "Thank you, Janet," I replied. "I wish I could speak with Dave and address this, but you at least gave me an opportunity." "Don't thank me," she replied coldly. "I'll do my best to take it from you." That night, Janet prepared a salad for dinner. Her garden produce included lettuce, tomatoes, and celery, as well as turkey bits for protein. Great snack. I said, "What more might we have?" It was dinner time. She said, "You're on a diet." After supper, she scrubbed all of the dishes and led me into the kitchen to rinse and dry them. Despite the fact that I repaired appliances in town and had contacts with every major manufacturer, Jeanette did not have a dishwasher. She said, "I don't want her," when I mentioned it. We then sat on her porch swing and observed the stars and the night sky. When it cooled down, she pulled a blanket around us and we sat rocking and talking. She had me talk about what I was feeling. It felt great to talk it out. She also told me numerous things I didn't know about her. I watched her grow up. However, there appear to be some aspects of the people we know and love that are kept hidden from us all. Janet oversaw my computer repair department, but she didn't have a computer at home. She had an iPad, which she could use for email and internet access. But at home, she favored simplicity. She was essentially a country girl raised in the metropolis. Mabel, on the other hand, desired all modern luxuries. She simply kept things till a new model was released. She valued sophisticated things more. Mabel has not worked in a day. She regarded herself to be part of the fast-paced modern city and found living here uninteresting. Maybe staying in Chicago was the best option for her. When it was time for bed, I took the blanket we were using on the porch and went to the couch. "What are you planning to do?" asked Janet. "I'm going to bed," I said. "Our bedroom is upstairs," she stated abruptly. "Janet, I have already taken advantage of your hospitality," I began. "God, you're an idiot," she chuckled. "Okay, last night we slept together." "True, you weren't sober, but it wasn't. You have already made love to me more than once. If you don't want to have sex with me, that's okay. But why should I suffer?" "What do you mean by suffering?" I asked. "I tried it for the first time last night. I received what my sister had for half of her blasted life. I fell asleep while holding someone who cared about me. I was so thrilled that this was the first thing that came to me this morning. Well, you remember. Anyway, I know you didn't mean what you said last night, and I don't expect it of you. But I really do want you to sleep next to me, at least for another few nights." "Me? There's no need for me to sit here alone in my small house while you stroll about in that store. You and Mabel called home." She looked at me and smiled. "I will not bite you until you ask. I will not put you under strain. Let's just be friendly, I promise." I followed her upstairs, recalling how her body looked without clothes. As I lay down that night, listening to her breath as she snuggled against me, I attempted to imagine resting close to her sister. I'm not sure where I came from, since when I awoke the next morning, she dragged me out of bed. "Come on, get up. It is time to get up." She said, "What?" I asked. "What is for breakfast?" "Dirt." She smiled. "We're going to do morning exercises. Breakfast will come when we get rid of the tummy." When I got out of bed, she had already prepared sweatpants and a t-shirt for me. I got dressed as she smiled at me. "Do not forget your footwear." She spoke mockingly. I bent down to put on my shoes. I noticed she was wearing flip-flops. "How do you plan to run in those?" I asked. "I am not going to." She chuckled. "I will train with you, but I do not require as much as you. My legs and ass already prefer you, so I am good." We left the house. I protested all the way. It was hardly light. "We're running to the diner for breakfast. You'll get a glass of fresh juice, 2 slices of bacon, half a slice of gently buttered bread, and half a grapefruit." She said everything I muttered. "That's not the worst part," she smiled. It is 6 in the morning. Your breakfast will be ready for you till 620. The eatery is 2 miles distant. If it takes you more than 20 minutes to get there, you will be without food. What happens after I get there? I asked. Then we shall eat breakfast together. Then we'll go home, perform our morning workouts, take a shower, and head to work. You have a short day planned, and we will return here to begin doing that other thing. What else matters? I asked. We'll discuss this when the time comes. Hurry up, or you'll be without breakfast. She smiled. When I started running, 10-minute miles were relatively easy, so she had a terrific plan. Every week, we would shorten the time by a minute so that I could follow it. This meant that every week, I had to go 30 seconds faster each mile. This meant that at the conclusion of the 4th week, I would have ran at my fastest speed ever, 8 minutes per mile. I had no idea what would happen next, but just now, all I wanted was my breakfast. So I ran. Every time I fell behind or attempted to relax, Janet drew ahead. Just seeing her beautiful ass in those shorts made me want to run faster. When we arrived to the diner, Rose, the waitress, smiled and directed us to our table. She looked at the clock on the wall, and we only had 30 seconds before we'd be hungry. Janet told me that she was proud of me. She kicked off her flip-flops beneath the table and ran her bare feet up and down my sweaty feet. She appeared to relish caressing me whenever possible. It was so different from Mabel, who only touched me during intercourse. I noticed that all of the males in the diner were staring at Janet in her exercise gear. The funny thing about all of this was that Mabel dressed in a way that would draw attention to herself, and she had to stroll around to ensure that everyone saw her. She then pointed out to me that others were staring at her. Janet made it apparent that only my viewpoint mattered to her. We reached home much slower, and I was on the verge of collapse. She looked at me and replied, "No, cowboy, we're not finished yet. Squats and push-ups. We also need to work out our upper body." Janet's understanding of squats was unusual. I lied down on the floor with my knees bent. She sat on top of my legs, grasping them for leverage. Every time I stood up, she kissed me. The first time, I only completed 10, then I fell. "Come on," she said. "One more," with tenderness. "I will make it worthwhile." I gazed at her. "I can't, Janet." I said. "Come on," she said. "You'll like it." I proceeded to lift myself up, tensing my stomach throughout. I was about to give up until I looked at Janet and noticed she had removed her top. My eyes widened, and I extended myself all the way just to ask her why she did it. When I was almost at the top, she grabbed me and pulled me the rest of the way. "I knew you could do it," she stated. She then kissed me. However, this kiss was not merely a click like the others. She pushed her tongue in my mouth and pressed me against her chest. She said, "You can do whatever you want, Dave. I truly believe in you." Push-ups made me feel warm throughout my body. She said she needed 10. Janet's push-ups also included kissing. I got into a push-up posture above her, and when I needed to lower my body, our lips would meet. Then I needed to push up from her, as out of shape as I was. I could only complete 6, but Mom remained proud of me. "Wait until you can do 20, she advised. I felt much more fatigued. "But you didn't play any sports?" I said. "I warmed up watching you, dear," she chuckled. Then I walked into her bathroom to take a shower. I was going to soap up when the shower door opened and Janet strolled in. "Relax. You do not need to do anything." "You don't want to," she replied. "I am merely conserving time and water." After our shower, we went to work. Over the last 3 years, I've had morning meetings with all staff. This way, we understood what we needed to do in terms of staff and whether certain areas, such as farm equipment, repair, household appliances, or computers, need more people, or whether they were free and could assist someone else. I frequently did odd things, and a few clients requested me to handle their renovations personally. Following the meeting, I congratulated everyone for handling everything while I was away. The prior day. They were all really sympathetic and advised me to take more rest. I was about to choose my remodeling when I realized that it was already booked. My job was in the workshop downstairs. I went down there, but before I could turn on the light, the door banged hard and shoved me against the wall. When I stepped off the bus in Chicago, I was enraged. Janet had a very good sense of humor. None of the clothes in her bag fit in the bus station restroom. I opened my luggage and attempted to change into a new clothing to replace my mint dress. I spotted a couple of pairs of casual pants that would be ideal for taking the bus. Unfortunately, she did not send any tops that would match them. The few tops she included were excellent, but they were designed to be worn with skirts or under other clothing. Another issue was that she hadn't brought any stockings, only socks. None of them matched the rest. The same was true with shoes. She gave me 6 shoes, 4 of which were unmatched, and the other 2 were insanely high stiletto heels that were extremely unstable. They were ideal for a cocktail party or a theater debut, but disastrous for any function that involved walking. So I ended up sporting bright yellow, too-tight leggings and an orange and purple striped blouse. I wore them without stockings or socks and with shoes. In this atmosphere, I appeared to be an approachable girl. My bus was going soon, so all I could do was hastily try to get the bird crap out of my hair. This means I didn't have time to apply my makeup. Believe it or not, Janet neglected to send the cosmetics with me. As I boarded the bus, I looked like a carnival clown transformed into an approachable girl, complete with smudged Joker makeup and dried bird droppings in my hair. And guess what? It still did not afford me any privacy. As soon as the bus started going, the old man stood up, walked 3 seats, and sat next to me. "How much does sex cost?" He inquired so loudly that I was confident everyone on the bus heard him. My life could not be any better. It was an 8-hour bus ride. The only window on the bus that did not open was the one next to mine. However, the bus seat was more comfy than my bench, and I quickly fell asleep. I awoke to see the old man next to me stroking my breasts. I slapped him so hard that he fell out of his seat and began muttering to everyone that I was the first available woman he had ever dated who was anything other than pleasant, and that I was too pricey. He then told the man sitting next to him that I wasn't worth it because my breasts were mushy. The man desperately needs to learn to hush because everyone on the blasted bus could hear him. When we arrived at the first station, the driver required everyone to get off the bus. I begged him to let me stay on the bus and sleep, but he declined. He said we'd just be at the station for 20 minutes, and I could sit on the bench in front of it, and he'd come straight away and wake me up if I fell asleep. This is exactly what I did. After my previous journey, I was as fatigued as ever, and my legs hurt terribly. I stepped off the bus, dragging my suitcase behind me, and sat on a bench directly in front of the station. Of course, I fell asleep, and the bus driver awoke me a few minutes later. He smiled as he woke me up. "Is there shit in my hair again?" I asked. "No," he smiled and pointed below. Suddenly, I spotted someone's small dog urinating on the leg of the bench where I was sitting, and it was all pouring on me. I moved my leg, and he pointed to the sign I had been sitting next to. When I first sat down, I noticed a sign that I assumed was the name of the station we were at. In my situation, I didn't feel the need to read anything that didn't have the word Chicago in it. The sign said fresh paint. I tried to stand up, only to discover that my clothing were stuck to the swiftly drying bench. The driver scooped me up, ripping my clothing in the process. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get to Chicago and begin plotting how I would contact one of my men. The driver refused to let me on the bus. He placed a stack of newspapers on the seat to keep my garments from getting painted on it. Then we hit the road. When we arrived at Chicago's train station, I rose up to find newspapers clinging to the back of my pants. I just stood up and stepped off the bus. My mother and father were waiting for me. Their expressions indicated that they were curious in what had occurred to me. My father approached me, then swiftly backed away. "Mabel, you smell like cat pee." He said, "Actually, Dad, it is dog urine." But it's a long story. I stated, the people at the bus station smiled and laughed at my clothes and face. And of course, the newspapers adhered to my back. My mother didn't say anything. Moms always knew my father was his normal self. He laughed and grinned, hoping to keep the discussion continuing. We were all surprised when the old man I was riding with part of the way approached my father and remarked, "Hey, buddy, if I were you, I'd find another available girl. Her services are prohibitively pricey. Her breasts are quite tender. She's mean and smells like cat urine. I believe she may have an illness. If you are desperate for a woman, there are several prostitutes here. Let this one go." He went away, leaving my father standing with his mouth open as soon as we entered the car. My father inquired as to what the man was discussing. "It's just a misunderstanding, Dad." I smiled. My mother then took the initiative on her own. "Mabel, what did you do?" she inquired, staring at me as if she saw through me. "Mom, how do you know that I did something?" I squealed. "Mabel, if someone did something awful to you, you would be the first to notify Dave and he would handle it. This dude loves you. He would never allow someone to hurt you for anything in the world. If Dave done something horrible to you, you should have contacted your sister first, then us. Janet called and asked us to come pick you up at the station. When I asked if Dave and she were okay, she answered she was fine, and Dave was in a lot of pain, but he will be fine in the end. All of this implies that you did something." "So what did you do?" she insisted. Even my father glanced at me. "Is the situation so severe that you can't solve it?" he asked. "I am not sure I want to repair this." I said, "Dave is dull." So I found somebody else. My father braked so forcefully that I nearly flew through the glass. "What?" he asked. He glanced at me as if I were foolish. Over the next few days, I became accustomed to life at my parents' place. They mentioned multiple times throughout the day that they were not pleased with me returning to the nest, even temporarily. Their house was a 3-room colonial. There was a bedroom there. They slept. There was another bedroom that they converted into a gym or fitness area. In addition, they converted the final bedroom into a home theater and media room. I slept on the living room floor in a sleeping bag since they had spent $1,100 on the couch and Dad didn't want me to spoil it. On the 3rd day, I finally contacted Jeffrey. He responded to the phone call with caution. "Hello?" he said quietly. "Jeff, honey, it's me," I squealed. The line became silent. Then another person answered the phone. "Who is this?" they inquired. "This is Mabel Forrester." I said, "Bitch," she answered harshly. "This is Jeffrey's wife or possibly an ex-wife. I haven't decided if I should forgive him again. Did you know Jeffrey is unemployed, has no place to live, and no car?" I was shocked. "How about the Mercedes E-Class?" I asked. "Jeffrey, my paralegal, utilized my car to perform court duties. He got into some problems recently, so Delaval and my father fired him. Jeffrey has offered you the opportunity to support him. I'll grab all of his little stuff and packages. You are welcome to come and pick it up." I hung up, understanding I had issues. I've been lying to myself for the past few weeks. I was engrossed in a fantasy in which I was the center of my own small universe, with everyone else serving as supporting cast members. I have finally arrived at the scene in which the heroine is put to the test. The question is, can I pass this test? 3 roads were laid out for me. The first and most dependable option was to begin living independently. I am a strong lady who can go out and seek a job to become self-sufficient. Alternatively, I could invent something or establish my own business. The second option was to leave and find another man who could care for me and meet my needs. After all, I was a lovely, well-dressed woman with all the charms of a city girl. How could this be difficult? The third alternative, which was absolutely unacceptable, was to recognize my mistake and ask Dave for forgiveness. I begged him to take me back. I was convinced that I could bring Dave back with little effort. But the question is, did I really want him back? This is the easiest of the 3 possibilities for me. I figured that all I had to do was go home, put on some panties, and let him have sex anytime he wanted for the first week or 2, and everything would return to normal. I chose the third option as a backup plan in case the first 2 failed. I really loved the first option. So one night after my parents had gone to bed, I took out my notes and picked up the newspaper. I began looking at employment ads and realized I was in trouble. It was difficult to pick which jobs to apply for when I couldn't recall what I studied in college. I needed to talk with Dave. He could recall this meaningless information. Damn. Why should I remember this? I've been married for about 20 years, and we got married just a few months after I finished college. So I called home. The phone rang and rang, but no one answered. So I called his cell phone and answered the third call. "Dave, honey, what did I study at college? Do I hold a degree?" I asked. "Dave is no longer your beloved, and he is occupied." A woman's voice responded fiercely. "Who is this?" I asked. "Why are you answering my husband's phone?" "God, Mabel, I know you're a little slow, but don't tell me you can't recognize your own sister's voice," she said. "Janet," I snapped, "don't you have something better to do? David is more than capable of entertaining himself." "Goodbye, Mabel," she said. "Your major was in child development, but it was more than 20 years ago. It is probably no longer relevant, and frankly, you'd make an awful mother and an even worse teacher." Janet hung up on me. Child development. Why in the heck did I study for this? I reflected about it for a time and remembered it before I met Dave and started his business. I wanted to work with kids. I even planned to have children with Dave. He would be an excellent father. Why did I give up on this dream? I thought about it some further and concluded it was money. When Dave's business took off and I started getting whatever I wanted, it appeared that looking beautiful and being fashionable became even more essential. If I became pregnant, it would ruin my figure. I'd become one of those corn-fed country females with childbearing hips. The seats in my class were simply not large enough for that ass. What about clothing? Most of the designers I wore didn't produce garments that big, so I took the pill. And while Dave had discussed kids a few times throughout the years, we had our own activities to keep us busy. Okay, I could not find a job. I'll have to do better and launch my own business. Damn, how difficult could this be? Dave did it. And if he hadn't been such a nice guy, we may have become extremely wealthy. All I had to do was determine the type of business I wanted to create. And then the sky was the limit. So I spent a long time thinking about what I'm excellent at and what I enjoy doing. I was so calm as I thought that I noticed anything. My parents were having sex in the next room, only a few steps from me. How dare they? They appear to be having fun. They attempted to be quiet. The thought of my mother spreading her broad legs for my father was enough to silence me. I started to doubt my sanity. Finally, I knew they were done. God bless. Then I see them lying together in the dark, holding each other, much like Dave and I did. When did we give up on it? It used to make me feel so happy and loved. I've remembered. This was when I began spending more than $300 on my hair. I needed to keep my outfit consistent, so I wore a scarf over it at night. And I couldn't snuggle up with Dave because I required a particular pillow that supported my neck rather than my back head to protect my waves. In hindsight, it may not have been such a great deal. Dave always thought I was gorgeous, regardless of what I was wearing or how I dressed. Damn, Jeffrey constantly criticized my clothes and appearance when they weren't ideal. Okay, enough of the past. What am I excellent at? I definitely have a penchant for fashion. Perhaps I can create my own clothing store and eventually get into design. This would be an excellent start. I compiled a list of everything I'd need to launch my own apparel business. The next morning, during breakfast, my father sneered at me over his cup of coffee. I asked him directly how much money we had. "What does we kemosabe mean?" he asked. "I'm considering beginning my own business and I need a lot of money." "Dad," I said. He nearly fell over laughing at me. Then he stood up, glanced at me, and laughed again. My mother came in and asked him what was amusing. He told her that I was starting a business on my mother's credit. She didn't laugh, but instead smiled and reached over to pat my forehead. "Seriously, Dad, how much money do we have?" I snapped. He got serious and said no. I was stunned. "We've set away some money for the future," he explained. "We wanted to be able to do and see certain things as we grew older. We've also saved enough money to provide you and your sister with spare change in case of an emergency. But damn it, you can't foretell the future." Mom came over to hug him. "Mabel, your mother's health is costing us more than we could have imagined. When she was first diagnosed and she was practically screaming from ear to ear, I was eager to do anything to relieve her suffering. Her treatment is pricey, but it is worthwhile. Looking at her today, you wouldn't think she's in any pain, but it's eaten up nearly all of our funds. I wasn't sure what I would do. I even considered returning to work so we could have some money. Your husband recently received payment and urged me not to return to work. So your mother and I can spend our golden years together. He advised young people to work. We deserve to rest. So after a few months, when my retirement checks returned to an almost reasonable bank level, I called him and informed him we could pay for some of the treatments ourselves. He told us to spend the money on the excursions we wanted or go to the sites we wanted to see. "So, do you have any money?" I asked. "Yes, but I'm doing as my brother-in-law instructed. Your mother and I are going to visit the Grand Canyon next month," he said. I was angry. How can he even consider going to visit some hole in the desert when I really need money? "Dad," I said, "really? Is it true that if Dave hadn't paid for Mom's therapy, you would not have gone to Damn Canyon in the first place?" "Probably," he replied. "You never know what could happen. So, since the money came from both David and me, it is technically mine, and I want it." I said, "Mabel, you haven't moved since marrying that man. This is what is wrong with you. He spoilt you to the point where you don't believe you should smell your own farts. 10 cents. Dave gave. So I'll phone him and ask what he thinks. If he says give you money, we'll do it. I didn't understand what the issue was. I will pay them back as soon as my business takes off. How long might it take? At worst, it will be a few weeks. 1 month. The money will be repaid. Hell, the Grand Canyon is thousands of years old, nearly as ancient as my parents. It was not going anywhere. Dad looked at me and then went to the phone. He called Dave on his cell phone and quickly began talking to him. He laughed, muttered something, and instructed Dave to keep his head up. It would be better, he said, before hanging up and returning my call. Dave stated that the money for your mother's treatment was not reliant on your marriage. It was not a present. It was just the family assisting each other. He stated he will continue to assist us whether you marry or not. He stated your mother and I should enjoy the canyon and offered to pay for one of the helicopter excursions for us. He advised you to get a loan from a bank to start your business just as he did and everyone else does. My father replied, smirking at me. Why hadn't I thought of that? I cried over something so uninteresting. Dave has some very good ideas. Mabel, there are 2 more things we need to discuss. My father said. I simply glanced at him. Yes, Dad. What happened with you and Dave? Is he too furious about it to be serious? He asked. I've already told you. I thought I discovered someone better. I said, there is one more thing. You should probably start paying rent to live here. He said, what? I yelled. How can you possibly consider charging your own daughter rent for sleeping on the floor in this? I prudently did not complete my sentence. I simply nodded and told him we'd talk about it when I returned from the bank. I borrowed a dress from my mother that did not look too horrible. I went to the bank and applied for a loan. I had to wait more than an hour to see the loan manager. He asked the stupidest questions I've ever heard. Things like, do I have any collateral? Do I have any business management experience? He requested to see my company strategy and expense report. Are I going to rent or buy? What should I do, rent or buy? I didn't know what he was talking about. I got up, apologized, and returned home. I was forcibly shoved against the wall in my workspace. I reasoned that if I kept silent and did not cause them any difficulties, someone could wish to steal some tools and equipment. Maybe they would have just departed. I felt the man's hands go down my sides and reach behind me. They were obviously checking to see if I had a weapon. My heart was racing so rapidly I feared it would burst out of my chest. I hadn't felt that afraid in a long time. The attacker reached in front of me and started unzipping my pants. I grabbed for the light switch on the wall and gazed at Janet's cheerful expression. You terrify the crap out of me, I shouted. Well, you won't keep your end of the contract? She responded by shouting back. Janet was dressed in overalls commonly used by mechanics and technicians. She wore a backwards baseball cap and had her long hair twisted into a ponytail. She was also wearing safety glasses, but the jumpsuit zipper stopped at her waist, revealing 2 naked breasts that threatened to burst at any minute. What do you mean? I don't care about my goal, I asked. Last night you slept in bed with a healthy, naked lady who clearly wanted to cuddle with you, and you did nothing, she stated. You said we didn't have to do anything, I remarked, reminding her. Well, I lied, she explained. Did you appreciate sleeping in my bed last night? I nodded. My head, I actually did. It was like when Mabel and I were young, only better. Nothing beats snuggling with a warm body while you sleep, especially when that body moves and takes shape like yours. You feel really adored. I believe most people miss this more than sex. When a marriage ends, Mabel has become too fashionable for me in recent years, and I have missed it. Say something dumb, Janet advised. Yes, I enjoyed it. I said. I felt very special and looked after. You're attempting to avoid the term love, she snapped. I felt the same way. The trouble is that running your hands over my body at night generates a reaction. As you can see, she remarked, turning around and spanking herself. Very. She turned to face me, a healthy young woman. She pinched her breasts, as if inviting me to come and inspect. So if you want to continue sleeping with me, it's not free, it'll cost you money, she said. I will write you a check, I mumbled. No nonsense. She said she didn't have any money. I want some of this. She stroked the front of my pants before stepping back and smiling. Forget it, she said. Anyway, you are about ready to burst. It probably won't be a problem. She took my hand and we walked over to the computer. She scanned a few pictures of my automobile. We looked at the car from various angles and modified pieces. We replaced the wheels and tires. We've modified the front grills. We've added a dark rear panel. We completely overhauled the braking system. We modified the color. Then we began arguing. The disagreement began when she inquired if I wanted to install a supercharger or something more unique, such as a turbocharger. American muscle cars rarely employed turbochargers. Even nitrous oxide injection devices became increasingly prevalent. In the end, we opted to make engine adjustments as an afterthought. We discovered that we operate well together. We fell in love with the chrome Pilot's wheels at the same time. Janet requested 20-inch wheels. I told her that these wheels were not lightweight, and the additional 2 inches in diameter would slow the car down. We purchased wheels with Hankook racing tires. We then ordered drilled and slotted brake rotors and pure white brake calipers to match the paint color. We chose. We ordered chrome top and bottom grills and set to work. Then we approached the automobile and began disassembling it. After removing the wheels, we realized we'd need to replace the suspension. We drove for 4 hours until Janet suggested we pull over. We returned to her house, where she suggested I change clothes. The amusing thing was that despite the fact that we were both supposed to sleep in her room, she stored all or nearly all of my belongings in the guest room closet. Women seem to be able to share everything with guys, except their closets. We, of course, showered together to remove the oil and filth from the automobile. Then Janet went to her room. I quickly changed into my casual jeans and shirt. Janet entered when I was sitting on the room's bed, testing it and springing us. I was fascinated. First and foremost, she changed her attire in just a few minutes. Mabel usually spent 2 hours preparing to go to the store. Second, as nice as she appeared, Janet was stunning. I've always known she was attractive, but possibly because she was 15 years younger than Mabel, I always saw her as a child. However, by the age of approximately 30, she had matured into a woman. She had lovely round buttocks that fit wonderfully into pants. It wasn't the models, but it was scarcely perceptible. That was authentic country girl ass. Her waist was really tiny and then broadened out to match her lovely breasts. They appeared to have a life of their own, bouncing and moving beneath her top. Even under the control of the bra, there was enough movement to tell they were real. Where are we going? I invited her to the cinema. She replied, "Don't worry, we won't go to the drive-in movie theater, but we need to get you out there so people can see that what happened with my stupid sister didn't break you." And off we went. We went to see Nicolas Cage's latest film. Janet adored Nicolas Cage. While we went down the street from the theater, I couldn't help but hold her hand while we talked about what we loved and disliked about the film. It was another of her characteristics. I never ran out of topics to discuss with Janet. Mabel and I hardly talked. I always initiate talks about business or activities in the area. She was not interested. She'd chat about new outfits or vacation destinations, and I wasn't interested. So I believe we simply stopped chatting after a time. We ate dinner at a diner and laughed the entire time. Then we returned home to sit on the porch and speak some more. Janet could be frank about a variety of topics, but there were some that she simply refused to consider seriously. When I thanked her for spending so much time with me and assisting me in dealing with what Mabel had done to me, she simply rolled her eyes and replied, "Men." She was also extremely unpredictable. While we were eating supper at the restaurant, a couple of people approached us to express their regret for what transpired between Mabel and me. I was amazed at how much the folks in town cared. When a number of people asked how Janet and I got along, Janet grew quite nervous. "Well, I need to make him feel better. We are family." Janet stated that he is not ready to date yet. "Sally, don't rush to remove your huge undies too soon." When we arrived home from our morning run, Millie Tyler was waiting for us on Janet's porch. "Good morning, Janet," she said abruptly, and then slowly, like maple syrup flowing down the side of a tree in early autumn. She said, "Good morning, Dave." Janet went on the offense. "Millie Tyler, it is too early in the morning for good folks to visit. Besides, we don't have time for visitors. Dave needs to complete his morning exercise." Millie smiled as she continued, "He looks perfectly healthy. Me. I just came to apologize for how Mabel treated him, and I wanted to invite him over for dinner and support him during this difficult time." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw Millie's large breasts and the fact that she was clearly not wearing a bra. "Dave, you must use caution while selecting someone to assist you in overcoming your feelings for Mabel. I'm sure you don't want to be in the same circumstance in, say, 15 years. She was so inconspicuous that I missed her hint. But Janet did. And it began. This morning, Janet transformed from the caring Swedish woman I had always known to something utterly different. "Get off my porch, Millie, and never return to my house again. If Dave decides to return to the home he shares with Mabel, you can see him there, or he can come to you if he prefers, but never again. Do not come here unless you know it's good for you. Well, I made him a fresh strawberry pie." Millie smiled and handed me a plate of pie. Janet grabbed the pie before I could receive it and hurled it halfway down the driveway. "He is on a diet. He does not need your cake, and he is allergic to strawberries," she snapped. "Now get lost." Then she glanced at me and grabbed my hand, leading me inside the house. Janet supported my knees while I performed crunches. But there was no kissing, and I had to do push-ups alone while she counted. I desperately wanted to get to the toe to see what I'd get. But despite my pain, I only made it to 14. "Do you no longer care about my personal growth?" I asked. "Would you like more time? Stare at Millie's enormous breasts?" Janet let out a bark. "Of course not. These objects are too large." I responded. "She will probably strangle me in my sleep." "So, what size do you prefer?" she asked. "Well, Millie's are plainly too big," I explained, and to be honest, Mabel's were too little. Someone in the middle would be ideal. This caused Janet to smile again. We spent the next few weeks together virtually exclusively. We woke up and played some sports together. We went to work and had lunch together. We worked on my car and ate dinner together. Every night we talked and gazed at the beautiful sky. Throughout the month, I lost nearly 9 kg. I looked younger and fitter than I had in a long time. In the 5th week, Janet abruptly proposed that I go into town and get a haircut. She knew exactly what she wanted and told her hairdresser. Then we purchased me a few new suits and gowns. Janet. She suggested we go out, perhaps to a nearby town, to celebrate my weight reduction and the new me. We still needed to wait for a few things to be completed. We were almost finished with the car, but we are still waiting for several parts. We decided to make a compromise. Janet still wanted a boost, but I did not. As with most power boosters, they eventually wore down your rotating assembly. However, Janet showed me an online advertisement for a hood intake system. This was a huge pipe that was positioned on top of the engine and supplied more air to the intake. Theoretically, the quicker you run, the more extra air it pumps in, similar to a supercharger or turbocharger, but without forced air. It was supposed to arrive in a few days, and we planned to install it before spending the evening on our way out. But a lot changed that evening and the following morning. First and foremost, Janet and I frequently fulfilled each other sexually. But that night, we simply lay in bed as normal. We were clutching to each other, constantly claiming it was for warmth or to feel cared for. But she abruptly turned around and climbed on top of me. We made love quietly at first, and then we simply slowed down. Do not get me wrong. We were both healthy, and we had sex several times every month, not as often as she had suggested, and certainly not as frequently as I would like. But this time was different. Instead of yelling, "Take me," she shouted something far more intimate. It seems that they should not be mentioned. I remember her telling Dave, "Make me yours." And in the depths of my spirit, I understood I wanted her to be mine. She merely spoke those 3 words, which ended our beautiful casual relationship. "I love you, Dave." Then she abruptly stood up and fled the bed. It seemed as if I had witnessed something I should not have seen. When I awoke the next morning, Janet had changed. I tried to hug her like I had done so many times in the previous 5 weeks, but she pulled away from me. "Dave, I don't feel great this morning. I do not want to infect you. I have something," she said. "Can you take a run without me?" "Yes, but I cannot have breakfast without you," I told her. "Dave, I do not think I can today." "If I do, I'm not sure it will stick with me," she answered. "How about our big meal and a night on the town?" I asked. "Perhaps we should postpone it." "No, dear, I wouldn't miss this for everything," she smiled. "See you later." As sensitive as I am, I didn't detect anything that day. She did show up to work later and observed me working on the automobile. When we were done, she ran up and hugged me. This hug was the greatest part, even superior than the automobile. Later that night during supper, everything was perfect. Janet looked more stunning than ever. The automobile was excellent. The cuisine was excellent. I should have expected some black clouds. "Dave, I believe you are ready to stand on your own 2 feet again," she said shortly after dinner. "At the very least, my idiot sister has rectified all of the damage she caused to you." "Janet, what are you talking about?" I asked. "Nothing. She simply stated that she believes you are ready to return to your own house and resume your normal life. People are starting to speak about us, but Mabel will be in court next week as a witness in Jeff's divorce," she explained. "This will allow both of you to discuss your personal experiences." "What exactly are you talking about?" I asked. "Is this related to last night?" "Don't worry about it," she advised. I could tell she was trying to remain emotionless. "You were simply too excellent in bed." And I started acting silly. "You and I are just two healthy people getting our needs addressed. It has always been about having the strength to make a decision. You're in better shape now, and you look much better. But you are still the wonderful person my foolish sister married." I'm sure I saw a tear fall down her cheek. "Go to court and look at her," she instructed. "Then consider what you actually desire. If you decide you want her back, you can do so. Make sure she is the one who changes. There is nothing wrong with you." We still slept together that night, but it was only for sleep. The following morning, Janet left for Chicago to spend time with her folks. I despise my parents. Over the last week, we've been busy converting the media room into a bedroom. It appears that we will have a special guest who need his own room. I'm sleeping on the living room floor like a puppy, and their special guest will take the room. I've even stopped attempting to move to the couch in the middle of the night, because if my father finds me on the couch during his nocturnal bathroom trips, he gets upset. I gave up on the notion of launching my own business and chose the second alternative: find another man. I've only gone on 3 dates in the past 7 weeks. Only one of them looked promising. The first 2 guys were awful. Guy number 1 was a stockbroker, and he was wealthy enough to take me to an excellent French restaurant. We sat in a booth in the far corner. I requested a table at the door or in the center, but when the head waiter inquired where he wanted to sit, my witness gestured to the dark corners in the rear. "There's more romance there." My witness said dinner was delicious, and then he escorted me to his home. As soon as we arrived, he went to his palace for the night. He got out a bottle of wine and instructed me to take off my clothes. "What?" I asked. He said, "Take off your clothes." "I don't do anything sexual until at least the 3rd or 4th date," I said, stunned. He seemed really sophisticated. "Listen, Masu," he said to Mabel. I corrected him. "Whatever he says. I phoned you tonight because the woman I'm quite interested in is preoccupied with something. The only future for us is a friend with benefits arrangement. I'm not interested in being your friend without advantages. So if you want to wait until your 3rd or 4th date, you are insane. There will not be a second. Now take off your clothes. Take me home now." I said. "You are a big girl," he continued. "Get out." He then held open the door for me. "Could you please call me a taxi?" I asked. "Okay," he said. "You are a cab." I honestly intended another C word. "But if you want to be a taxi—" The next thing I knew, he had closed the door and I had no idea where I was. Fortunately, I knew my parents' address. I started heading toward the main road. I noticed numerous stores and restaurants nearby that I could call from. Unfortunately, before I arrived, it began to rain lightly. But by the time I got to the main road, it was pouring like buckets. I walked into the store looking like a drowned rat and called a taxi. My second date was much more memorable. I met a guy on the internet. It was one of those find-a-partner e-commerce sites. He was exactly who I was looking for. A wealthy, dignified guy who enjoyed the finer things in life and was charitable. Dave turned out to be all I had hoped for. At 7:30 p.m., the limousine arrived in front of my parents' home. I went outside and sat there. There in the back seat was the oldest man I'd ever seen. He was older than my grandparents when they passed away. He even had an oxygen tank in the limousine. The first thing he said between heavy gasps was that I was older than I had told him. He also mentioned that I was little overweight. Before we left the block, he attempted to squeeze one of my breasts with his bony hand. "She's kind of soft," he replied, frowning. Then his eyes rolled back and a series of alarms began to wail. The driver came to a stop, got into the back seat, and began injecting and pounding him on the chest while operating on the elderly man. He stared at me and instructed me to get out of the car. We were approximately 5 kilometers from my parents' house. As I began walking, I recognized a store where I might likely phone my father. I walked towards the store. 2 people jumped out of the alley and dragged me in. One of them seized my backpack and began searching through it. He shouted, "You only have $3 damn dollars? Where's the rest?" "That is all I have." I shrugged. "I am going through a divorce." "Well, look at you," he exclaimed. "Okay, take off your clothing. We do not have all night." "I'm not going to be naked in an alley just to have sex with you," I yelled. His partner approached and struck me hard in the face. My head began to whirl. He grinned at me as he delicately removed my skirt. Then he removed my top, almost gently. I stood in an alley wearing only my bra and panties in front of 2 men whose faces I couldn't see due to their masks. I couldn't believe how eager I was, considering it had been a few months since I had sex. 2 males seized my clothes and began to flee. "Aren't you going to do this?" I asked. "Hell no," said the first guy. Furthermore, the second guy commented, "Your breasts appear to be soft. We can sell your clothes at the store down the street to make enough money for an available female." Then they left me standing there naked. What else might go wrong? I considered it, and then felt the usual dampness in my hair when I heard the sound of a bird overhead. Damn, I thought. And I was correct. My third date was the worst. Almost as soon as we got into his car, he began pestering me. He attempted to covertly touch my breasts. He tried to touch my legs as he drove. "Where are we now?" I asked. "Where are we going?" "We're here," he said. "But this is a parking lot." I said, "They do not take you to the parking lot for a date." "Darling," he said, "this is not the date, okay?" I said. I was perplexed. "What do you mean? This isn't a date?" I asked him. "Listen, little sister," he said. "You've already had a couple disastrous dates, correct?" "Yes," I said. "How many horrible dates have you had?" "A few, correct?" he asked. "More than a few." I said. I reflected on all the bad dates I'd had before meeting Dave. Then I began to think about Jeff and all the males I met after marrying Dave. Suddenly, I understood how foolish I had been. Dave treated me like I was unique. Dave changed as I grew up. He adored me more as my buttocks grew larger. Dave began to like women with large buttocks. Every other man I went out with thought I was a piece of meat. Even Jeff, the liar who started it all, continued to be my witness. When a female goes on a poor date, she is wasting time. When a man goes on a poor date, he wastes money and time. And in most cases, it takes numerous dates to determine whether or if sex will occur. Even then, it will take at least 1 or 2 attempts to determine whether she is any good at it. Yes, that is true. I stated it's difficult for men. That's why I began holding auditions before meeting anyone. He said, "This is not a date. This is your audition. Don't get me wrong, I like you, but I can't modify the rules," he said. "What should I do at my audition?" I asked. "Should I tell you something about myself and my preferences?" "No, honey, reserve the romantic stuff for your date. You may start by stripping naked and lying in the back seat." He smiled. "You expect me to have sex with you only to get a date?" I yelled. He just nodded. "So what happens if I decide not to do this?" I grinned mockingly. He simply shrugged as if he didn't care. "You have a long way to go home, honey. You should get started," he advised. I got one leg out of the car and looked up. Several angry birds were circling the area, and it appeared that it was about to rain. "Okay," I replied. Whatever he did to me had to be preferable to being urinated on by birds and wet in rain. Less than 5 minutes later, we were having sex in his car's back seat. I stared up at the upholstery in his car, trying to figure out how I might get Dave back. Dating was plainly not working. We had sex twice before he drove me home. I suppose that's when I understood Dave was truly unique. He appeared to be the only man who knew how to make love. Every previous man I'd slept with was solely looking for his own pleasure. They all used me. Did Dave truly love me? And I really botched it up. As soon as my witness arrived at my parents' house, I rushed out of the car as swiftly as possible. "Baby, thank you for listening," he said. "But I'm not certain I want to date you. You're like a piece of wood in bed." I was about to burst into laughing when I discovered my mother, father, and sister standing on the porch, mouths wide open in amazement. "You are an easy girl," Janet exclaimed. She returned to the house. Mom and Dad followed her but left me alone. "Mabel, what the heck is wrong with you?" asked my father. "Why does Janet have her own room?" I asked. "Janet is not married," my father replied furiously. "She doesn't have a husband to return to. She is going through an emotional moment right now, Dad. If I don't play my cards right next week, I will not have a husband to go to." I cried. Janet and Mom entered the room. Mabel cheated on Dave. Janet snapped. She was caught. The entire town knew what was going on, so we all got together to help. "How did she get caught?" I asked my father. "Do you know how they go from car to automobile in the driveway and display folks on the big screen?" My father laughed at this. "It's hilarious when they catch someone eating or wearing mustard on their face." He laughed. "Well, they found your daughter with a guy pinching her breasts while she was enjoying him," Janet snapped. "Almost everyone in the city witnessed it. They got together and asked her to sign one that the judge had issued." "What is OMD?" Mom asked. Janet stated it was an overnight scam. "In our state, divorces take at least 60 days. In 10 days, Mabel and Dave will sign the official divorce papers. They will meet to consider whether or not to amend the provisions of the divorce agreement that Mabel signed. She signed under duress. I believe they would have tarred and feathered her if she had not done it. However, once she signed that paper, she and Dave were free to do or not do whatever they wanted with anyone they chose. So she may be an unapproachable girl, but it's true. And it will become even more so next week when she signs the official forms. I'm not signing anything, I snapped. Over the past few months, I saw what I had and I want this fool back. You know I can wrap it around my little finger like this before I leave for court tomorrow. I'm going to spend the entire week between Jeff's divorce and mine attempting to reclaim my husband. So this horror can come to an end. "Why are you here, Janet? And don't try to prevent me from getting him back," I asked. "I do not want him to make decisions about how to live his life based on what I desire," she stated. "Dave is like that. He's definitely the nicest person I know. I want him to grasp what he wants and what will bring him happiness. I don't want to watch him accomplish anything since he'll be imprisoned in it regardless. This." Then she went inside her room. 2 days later, I got off the bus and grabbed a taxi back home. Surprisingly, the door's locks were not altered. My keys were even on the table in the hallway. Was this a good sign? Dave did not replace the locks since he wanted me to remain here. I went upstairs and took a nice shower for the first time in a long time. I went through my closet of good clothes to get an outfit. I shared a stunning dress as well as an almost hidden sheer bra and panties pair. The panties must have shrunk in the wash. I had trouble getting them on my buttocks. When I did this, they got so tight that wrinkles appeared on my legs and the elastic around the waist snapped. Of sure, the bra will continue to fit. I couldn't put on the outfit either. I had to select a different outfit. It was similarly a tight fit, but I managed to put it on. I was due to be in court at 10, but it was 9 a.m., so I had to leave. I fell into the comfortable seats in your automobile. Damn, I missed it. I had just arrived at the city square when a white Mustang whizzed by me. It was a nice automobile. Maybe I could convince my stuck-in-the-mud hubby to trade in his rusted old Mustang for one of these. The automobile was parked a few spots away from me. It was encouraging to see fresh people move into town. When he got out of the automobile, my jaw fell. It was Dave, my husband, Dave. He shed approximately 13 pounds and chopped his hair. He was more attractive than ever. He vanished while I stared at him. I could not wait for him to arrive home in the evening. Maybe I'll even pay him a visit at work. I haven't gone there in years. So it was time for a visit. Suddenly, getting him back became something I wanted to accomplish rather than something I had to do in order to exist. I observed from the rear of the courtroom. A man's honor was ruined. I could have attended if not for my buddies. I assumed that without the judge, the sheriff, and so many other people, particularly Janet, I would be in the same situation as this poor person. His wife was controlling and seemed to relish everything that occurred to him, which was perhaps for the best. Sure. In our marriage, I controlled the money, but Mabel controlled me. So what is the difference? I wanted to see Jeffrey humiliated, but it was too much. Mabel approached the podium and told her piece this. She revealed a little more about what was going on between her and Jeffrey, or at least what she was willing to admit in court. The case left poor Jeff with nothing but the clothing on his back and my sorrow as his wife and her formidable legal team fled. She looked at me and nodded. "It looks like it's your turn now," she said. "Teach that bitch a lesson." When I turned to exit the courtroom, Mabel ran up to me. "Dave, honey, I'm so sorry about everything," she said. "I believe my hormones were out of whack. I'm not sure what made me do that. I believe something was incorrect." "You look different," I said, then began to walk away. "Wait, Dave, are you going home? Would you like to talk? Perhaps we could eat dinner together," she asked. "I do not think so, Mabel," I said. "See you in court." I walked away from her, smiling and whistling. I had finally decided what I wanted, so what should I do? 8 days later, Janet came home. Millie was the first person she saw when she pulled into the store parking lot. "Hello, Millie," she said. "Sorry for that incident a few weeks ago. Do not worry about it. Millie claimed we were both after the same guy. This happens." "Have you heard any news concerning your sister?" asked Millie. Janet shakes her head. She and her husband decided to sell their huge house and relocate. They went around in that luxury car for a week, giving instructions and making purchases. They cannot wait to get out of here. Millie commented, "I guess it shows they can make money." After everything he's been through, including the divorce, you'd expect him to have a bit more tenacity. Once you've gotten it, you'll always have it. I suppose Janet's heart and stomach fell. She truly believed or hoped that Dave would be stronger, but she had to live her life. She had no other options. She drove up to her house and noticed a white Mustang in the driveway. Dave was always generous. Maybe he left the car as a reminder of their time together. If only he understood how much this moment meant to her when she unintentionally disclosed her actual emotions. She knew she needed to leave him. The next morning, when discussing time, she discovered another reason to let him leave. She attempted to open the door and was having problems when it suddenly opened. Ed and she found themselves in an embrace, painfully squeezed. "Welcome home," Dave stated. "What are you doing here?" she asked harshly. "Shouldn't you be with my idiotic sister? Why should I be with her?" "Janet, I love you," he said. "We are divorced." I handed her the house and some money, telling her to sell it, make more money, and leave. If she does not sell the house within 6 months, she will only receive $50,000 and will demolish it to create a sports complex for youngsters from both communities. "Where will you live?" she asked. "Are you with me?" he said. "I hope so. But I can sleep in the guest room if you choose." "No, buddy. We've already discussed this," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. She then drew him towards the swing on the balcony. "Dave, the guest room will soon be gone." She smiled. "Have you finally decided to modernize your home and convert it into a media room as your parents did?" he asked. "No, honey," she replied. "It will eventually become a bedroom, but not for a few years, so I'll end up with my own room," he said. "God, you're a fool," she exclaimed. "You made me pregnant. This is going to be a nursery for a while, and eventually we will convert it into a bedroom for our baby. I also love you." "Well, I'm glad I didn't give all our money to your sister," he remarked. "Why?" She smiled. "We will be all right." "Yes, but the next time you become pregnant, we'll have to build another room to the house," he explained. "Who is Mabel's new man?" Janet asked. Jeffrey Dave chuckled. "I met with them the same day Mabel and I signed our final divorce papers. I offered them $1 million and a house to share. Janet was only going to get a few $1,000 in a very short period. Jeffrey was basically homeless and without money. They agreed. But I did add a couple criteria." Janet grinned as she kissed and clung to him. "Even if they despise each other today, they are only compensated as long as they remain together. If either of them abandons the other or cheats, they lose all rights." The strange thing is that Mabel has gained at least 22 kilograms, and Jeffrey has lost interest in her. If he ever was, he blames her for derailing his marriage and career. And she noticed how cowardly and pathetic he is, and she blames him for our failed marriage, so she absolutely despises him. There are only 2 things they despise more than each other. What? 2 items. Janet expressed a desire to work despite her lack of funds. Dave replied, grinning. "They will kill each other," Janet remarked, laying her long legs over his and resting her palms on her barely rounded stomach. "Don't get too comfortable just yet," I told her. "We still have stuff to do." "For example, what?" she asked. "Well," I said, "when it all began, I was a happily married man. I'm happy again, but not married." Janet glanced at me with tears in her eyes. You mean what she said? Do you want that? Yes, I answered. I need Millie's telephone number. Janet flung me onto the porch floor and stared at me with an ugly glimmer in her eyes. I felt the area around my thigh. Damn, Janet, you broke it, I said. Sorry, honey, she said. Is it a leg or the hip? I'm not very old, I snapped. Did you break the box with your wedding ring? She rolled me over and began checking my pocket until something else appeared. I could see she had noticed. She discovered the box and set it aside as she removed my pants right there on her veranda. Would you like to see the ring first? I asked. Don't get me wrong, she stated. The ring is significant, but I am not going to say no. I've wanted this for most of my life. However, that is more significant than the ring. She then picked up the box and ring and went to her car. Janet, where are you going? I inquired, puzzled. I have to show Millie my ring, and those bitches in town will leave you alone. She grinned. Janet and I married, had 4 children, and have lived happily ever after. Mabel arrived in town less than a year after our wedding and 3 months after the birth of our eldest daughter. She and Jeff went through all of their money and broke up. Jeffrey ended up in jail due to faulty checks. He and his cellmate Bubba are thought to be very happy together. Mabel needed a job. We had an issue because she lacked the abilities. However, family members must aid each other. And because she was Janet's sister, we hired her as a delivery driver at minimal salary. She lives in a modest apartment that we built over the garage. We sometimes pay her more to watch the kids while Janet and I go out to have fun. We determined that the child development degree should be used for anything. When Janet and I catch her longing glance, we simply smile and wave. I know some people think she got off too easy after what she put me through, and you might be right. On the other hand, some argue that a well-lived life is the best form of retribution. I'm quite happy. I love Janet, our children, and my life more than I've ever loved. Mabel. Janet is overjoyed because she finally has me, and Mabel must stare at us every day, reflecting on what she has lost and what could have been. Thank you for spending time with us. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more fantastic videos.